to have Antonio Vega Macotela here. Antonio is documenta artist. Last year his project Mill of Blood was in front of Orangerie, very close to here. And this is how we got to know each other. I was part of the team setting up his project. And when I was thinking about whom to invite to a symposium, AUTONOMIE, I thought of Antonio because his project, Mill of Blood, is like an autonomous integrated system. In general, his approach to this work is, yeah, how can I say, autonomy related. Yeah. And yeah, Antonio will introduce us to his work and tells us where he is from, where he started his studies, his autonomous vision.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know, it's not working. Okay. So, I'm gonna tell you, I was thinking about autonomy, and I was thinking about education. I come from the worst art school in the world, I would say, but at the same time it's the best. It's the National School of Fine Arts in Mexico. This school is kind of 2 hours away from the center of the city, so you may imagine that it's very difficult to get there. It's surrounded, it's basically a little, it's a town inside a very big city. So it has the worst problems of a little village, at the same time it has the worst problems of a city. A lot of traffic and nothing there. So, why is this at the same time the best school? Because most of the Mexican famous artists came from this place. Gabriel Orozco, all these people who was like trained by here, like such as Abraham Cruz Villegas, who had this show in the Tate Modern Turbine, Carlos Morales, a lot of people who also was in Documenta from Mexico. The thing is that everybody we know that this school is very bad, and nobody goes to school. So how can we be artists if we don't go to school? The thing is that we learn how to create our school inside the school. I come from a generation who, well, together with a teacher whose name is Jose Miguel González Casanova, we created a system, which in the end became a school. So this system, this slash school, has few rules. One of the rules is that we shouldn't have any discipline, neither painters, sculptures, and nothing, photographers or nothing, because our discipline was to think. The second rule is that we should have like at least 2 disciplines, 1 theoretical and at least 3 practicals. And the theoretical ones shouldn't be not related to arts. We should choose between, I don't know, like economy, sociology, mysticism, whatever you want. So in the end, we created this small school was named Medios Multiples, which translation would be multiple media. And this is where I started my work as an artist, doing like this research. This is like an image of the school, very ugly, but you know, it's the nicest view I could get. And we created a book. This book is called Multiple Media. In this book, we were like, the beginners were like, I don't know, like 10 artists who developed projects who were related to the social context of very specific population. So here where I began like my research, and my research is about economy. I am interested in economy because it's a system of representation of labor, time, and energy. What you saw in Documenta was one of the latest research, but yeah, I'm gonna begin by the beginning. This project began in a prison, in a Mexican prison. Sorry. I just wanted to, do you have internet? Yeah. Give me 1 second. Just let me, I think that I have to, I just wanted to show you the book. I don't know if I can go to the, give me 1 second. Do you know how can I go to internet from here?
No.
Well, it's too late. Nope. Create link. Next. Save link. Sorry, I thought that it would work, but apparently it's not working. Nope.
Can we?
No, it doesn't matter. Oh shit. Sorry, I'm not very technology. Well, could you help me? How can I?
Vollbild?
How can I? Okay, amazing. So well, we are gonna have to we're not gonna see the link, but well, I was like trying to explain you the first project I developed about economy. I went to a Mexican prison. I was interested in time and in money, because money is a social representation of time, but it's a very specific time. In order to transform the time into money, you have to have this specific time, which is the objective time, meaning that time has to be transformed into minutes, seconds, hours, in order to make it possible to exchange. I was interested in another kind of time, which is like subjective time. You know, time happens in a different way if you are in love, if you are angry, if you are bored. So I went to this prison and I proposed to the prisoners one deal. This deal is that I would do whatever the prisoners wanted me to do. In exchange, they had to do whatever I asked them to do inside the prison. For instance, this was the exchange number 7. The prisoner asked me to visit his brother and listen to his brother singing. At the same, I asked him to sit in his cell, and he should throw each one of the bread he did. All the things I did for the prisoners were like videotaped in first-person shoot. Since I could not leave a camera inside the prison, the documentations that the prisoners did of the tasks I asked them were drawings, sculptures, and this kind of things. This is another one. This prisoner, each time I went to the prison, this prisoner asked me to listen to him. He was like a psychoanalyst. And I told him that he should bring the egg he would have for breakfast, and he should throw all the things he was telling me in order to make this simultaneous. In the exchange, we never exchanged 1 hour for 1 hour. The thing is that I told them we have like this connection. We shall start at the same time. And you have to think that while you are doing whatever I ask you, you are doing what you ask me. You are like hugging your mother. You are like doing all these kind of things. So I told them also, you finish when you feel I done my task. So sometimes the exchange was 1 month for 5 minutes, and vice versa. This guy asked me to celebrate the birthday of his mother. I was researching about the idea of instant, so I told him to search for each one of his scars, and he had to write a story next to each one of the scars. Well, this is a little complex. This guy, since I was him and he was me, because this exchange of time and this like magical pact, this guy asked me to test his new car. I was driving his car. So I gave him some A4 sheets and asked him to touch with his back the perimeter of the prisons. He was like a crab walking with the back against the wall. And he was drawing the things he was feeling in the back. So he did like this kind of electrocardiograms. I used these drawings to make a ceramics, which was the abstraction of the perimeter of the prison. So the people was able to touch this abstraction of the prison. And I like this sculpture because the ceramic gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. In the end, I like this mix between the ceramics and the fat of the hands and the tissue that you leave in there. This guy asked me to hug his parents and to shake hands with his neighbors. In exchange, there was like this game, the Chicago Bulls against the Charlotte Hornets. I asked him to tell me the story, to make a chronic about the game. He has to tell me how this game was developed as concrete poetry. You know, concrete poetry is this poetry that is like, for instance, when Apollinaire, which is like this very famous French poet, it was like this poet about raining. It says raining, and it has the shame of the rain falling. This guy, what I asked of the prisoners were like, since I had this idea that they couldn't trust in minutes, in seconds, and in money, so I was thinking, how can I measure time? So the only way for me was like using the body, heartbeats, breaths, thoughts. After this use of body, I was thinking about how time could create a space. So this guy asked me to serenade his mother. In exchange, I asked him to create a map of the prison, a sound map of the prison. So I tell him, you have to imagine that you're in the middle of the drawing, and you have to draw all the sounds you hear to the 360 degrees, and you have to codify them. In black, there were like the neutral sounds, in blue, the friendly, and in red, the aggressive ones. I was like studying space, you know, this idea of mapping through time, and this guy asked me to get drunk in his nephew's party, baptism party. So I asked him to go from his public space to his private space, like making drawings each certain space. It began in the fence, obviously, and it was like, maybe it was, I don't remember, that it was like each 50 meters, till he got to the telephone of his area, the door of his cell, the floor of his, what's the name of this, of his cell, the blanket. In the end, his private space was the rubbing of his penis. This is a little complex to explain. This guy asked me to sell his their prison techniques as if it was art in an contemporary art fair. In exchange, I gave them some of my contemporary art books, the Venice Biennale catalog, Art Today, and whatever. I told them, yeah, you create something that I can also sell. And they didn't check the books; they just shred them and made these bags. This guy asked me to sit. I was researching about the idea of taking a cigarette as the ritual for using this time, this idle time you have. I asked him to, this guy asked me to see, to see and video his son having his first steps. I had to stay like next to his ex-wife for like 6 months. And in exchange, I asked him to sit in his cell, collecting all the cigarette butts he would find. And that's basically that, because as you can see, when you see the cigarette butts in the outside, in the streets, you see that they are not totally consumed. In the prison, they are totally consumed. So I found this really very interesting, this idea about how to relate with this idea of waiting and ritual of time. In Mexican prisons, as you can imagine, population is very big. And more or less in a place which is the half of this, have to sleep about 20, 30 people. So some of them have to sleep stand like bats, and they are tied to the walls, literally, for letting them sleep. So I was interested in the idea of the body and architecture of the prison. So this guy asked me to apologize to his ex-wife. In exchange, I asked him to ask for one fingernail of each one of his cellmates, to place it in a 10 per 10 centimeter square. This guy asked me to find the, she got in love, but this guy only knew the first name of this girl. So I have to find her and tell her like a very small phrase. In exchange of this, he has this nervous stick, he goes all the time like this. So I asked him to use this nervous stick to carve the Monte Cristo Count book. There's something very interesting in Mexican prison. I'm an artist, I was researching about sculpture and drawing. For me, to sculpt is to add or take material in order to signify something. So prisoners in Mexico take the bricks of the prison to make grills. For me, this is sculpting. So this guy asked me to find her daughter in a Mexican province which is called Córdoba. For each attempt, I asked him to take off one brick of the prison and to carve it and put this electric filament into it, like, because in the end when you warm it, it's like neon. And I wanted to write the phrase, "Thus it disappears everything." So I found her daughter at the third attempt, so it remains as "Thus it disappears." In Mexican prisons, there's like a game. There's like a board game. This board game is very interesting because it's the maquette of the prison itself. So you are in this game, you have like these tokens, 4 tokens. Each one of them are prisoners. So the idea of the game, you have to escape from the prison, and you bet a lot. So well, this guy asked me to spy on his ex-boyfriend. He was a male prostitute, and see, I have to spy him and to write all the things he was doing. So in exchange, I asked him to create one of these prison games, board games, using his hair and the hair of his new lover. By the end of the project, I was researching about language and how language creates space. So there are like these 3 aromas in the prison, which is lavender, mint, and I don't remember the third one, which are the soaps. So at the same time, there are like 3 different languages in the prison, 3 different kind of languages or jargons. One of them is albur, so you speak, there are like 2 senses. One is sexual and one is the normal, the things that the other ones shouldn't notice that you're like harassing him or harassing her sexually. The second one is like the prison jargon. In this prison jargon, you invest the syllabs. I don't know how to say like the word. For instance, instead in Spanish, street is calle, so you invest the is yeca in prison jargon. And the third one is like the Mexican working class jargon, which is like a slang basically. So this guy asked me to fix his face, because he has the half of his face paralyzed. So in exchange, I asked him to write a part of a poem by Kurt Schwitters for Anna Bloom. And he wrote the same phrase into these 3 different jargons using this soap, which is the aroma of the prison. Yeah, this is a little bit baroque. By the end of the prison, it took me 5 years to finish 365 time exchanges. I was interested in this because I am interested in ritual, and the most of the time systems are based in the cycle that the Earth goes all around the sun. So that's why I decided to create 365 time exchanges. That took me 5 years and a little bit more. So by the end, it was very difficult for me to escape from it, because the most of the project was done underground. So in order to escape, this guy also continued to asking me to fix his face. I asked him to create me an amulet, for continue fixing his face. And this amulet, this guy hunt a rat and cut off its head, and took away the flesh. And in the end, this is one of the amulets that they do for the mafia bosses and these people inside the prison. So it was a protection amulet in exchange. This one of the last time exchanges. This was done with one of the mafia bosses. This guy asked me to traffic some things he needed inside the prison. In exchange, I asked him to make me a map of how 100,000 pesos are distributed inside the prison, because in Mexican prisons there's a lot of money, but really there's a lot. For Mexican standards, there's quite a lot. So 500,000 pesos were about 10,000 euros. So I asked him to map and to map how this money was distributed, and asking for one fingernail of all the people who touched the money. There is the name, the amount, and one fingernail of each one of the people who touched the money. And I received a grant from a bank. And for me, conceptually, it's very important. Each step of a project is very important conceptually, because in conceptual art and in art, everything signifies. So I was like, this was a bank, a grant from a bank, so for me it was a contradiction to have like a grant from a bank, because I was researching about money and systems different from money for measuring time. So this guy obviously wanted to escape from prison, so I decided to use this money to take him out from prison. So in exchange, I asked him to make me a map of the prison. So this was like the Harry Potter movie, and he had to draw each one of the footsteps, and he was to go to tour inside the prison, and he has to draw each one of the footsteps inside the prison. Yeah, and basically, and he had to codify in black. He had to draw black, footsteps where he could find any kind of surveillance. That could be one guard, a camera, or another prisoner. So the only materials I could get into the prison were like A4 sheets, because since the prison had to sleep together, they literally slept with the sheets of paper. So for this all this map was codified and divided into 500 sheets. This is more or less 15 meters times 9 meters size. So there were about 500, 600 sheets. That's why I was interested into doing this, because like to create maps of the prison is literally a prison break. So I wanted to play with this idea of using the bank for liberating this guy and creating a prison break. Well, this is basically the prison project. After this, also was working. I used to work, as I told you, with people, creating communities and creating Indian autonomous communities, such as the one I showed in the documenta. I'm going to talk about it later. This, I was working in a working class neighborhood, and the thing is very simple. We created our own refinery. So I was working to create our own gasoline and our own diesel and kerosene, all these kind of things. One day I was walking to my parents' house, and they live in front of a university. And I was listening a couple of engineers saying like, why do the American people tell us that we cannot create gasoline, since it's the same system as purifying tequila? It's exactly the same. So I called them and told them, yeah, how about if we create our own refinery? And I went to their neighborhood, and together with their mom, a tamales seller, which tamales are like a very small cake, a sherbet producer, and a plumber, we create our own refinery. This is Habemos Gasolina. The idea, so this sculpture transformed 1 barrel of petroleum into kerosene, diesel, and gasoline. This belongs to other project. You know, I used to work. I used to work with prisoners. Then I began to work with deserters from the army, and there I was working with miners from a place which is called Potosí in Bolivia. Potosí are the mines where the most of the silver that came to Europe was extracted. It's a very difficult mine because it's like 4,000 meters above sea level. Inside the mine there's like more or less about 45 Celsius, and outside is -2. And they only work with chisel and hammers and bikes and these kind of things. Very like 1800 technology. So I was interested in one thing, which is cocaine. Why I was interested in cocaine? Because this drug has 2 sides. One, which is cocaine. And cocaine, when you have it, activates the same parts of your brain that are activated when you're successful. There's a study of the MIT. But on the other side, you have the coca lips. The coca lips are the, let's say, the stimulants that the workers do in Peru and in Bolivia. And in order to survive in those mines, you have to chew them, because it's really very hard. I was interested, again, I'm an artist, I'm interested in the sculpture. And the sculpture at the same time is like to give meaning and purpose to material. So I was interested in having one, this sculpture, sorry, let me rephrase this. While you are not chewing these coca lips, you are putting the lips inside your mouth, and together with the palate and with the tongue, you create balls, which is like a sculpture process. So I was interested in one of these sculptures, which was one of these balls of coca. I wanted to put one of these balls into the Santa Barbara. Well, this is in Belgium, in Genk, where Manifesta 9 was held. I was invited there, and I wanted to put one of these balls inside of the place where Santa Barbara, which is the virgin of the miners, used to be. It was very complex to bring the ball of coca to Europe, as you can imagine. So in the end, I remember when I was with the miner and I asked him, how much silver do you get from 1 day of labor? He told me, yeah, it's more or less the same amount of coca that I'm going to give you. I was thinking, hey, there is equivalence. I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to take the easy way. I'm going to make a reproduction in silver of this. I couldn't because of the time, because, you know, I'm Mexican and I do the things till the last moment. And but the silversmith had a very good idea. He told me, how about if instead using a wax mold, a wax, you know, because like silver like castings are made using a wax mold, and then you put the silver, the wax melts, and you have the silver sculpture, whatever. So this guy told me, how about if instead using wax, we use the original one? So when we put the silver, it's gonna burn the coca, and it's gonna be like a mix between coca ashes and silver. For me, it was fantastic. So in the end, what we showed was like this experiment, which is like a mix between coca ashes and silver, with the shape of the palette of the miner. This is the study of exhaustion number 1, the equivalence of silver. The second study, well, I forgot to tell you, these studies were made. I left Mexico after the prison project because it was like I was very tired, and I began to work here. Well, not here, but in the Netherlands, in Europe. And I had to develop a studio and different kind of work. So this is I was interested about how wealth was like energy, because energy is not created, neither transformed, but moved from one place to the other. For me, wealth is the same. The wealth exists in the same, you know, it's exactly the same, but it's moved from one place to another through different systems, such as economy and colonization, blah, 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 usually from south to north. So I was interested in these processes. The second one, I was interested in who is the perfect worker under this system. And the perfect worker is the soldier, a military. So in Mexico in the 68 happened like this thing that a lot of students were killed by soldiers because of the Olympic Games and the protest. So this is one of the guys who did these things. Now he's an artisan of a thing which is called barro negro, which is black clay, which is basically a clay turned into black using ashes and lack of oxygen. So I began to work with this guy, and I wanted to reproduce his bots using this system. We cast his bots and we reproduced them, and we turned them black. I was thinking about ashes and about what kind of combustible should use to turn them black. So I decided to go to Mexico City barracks and to collect all the clothes of the people who wanted to be soldiers, and we use them as fuel to finish these bots. So this is the second study of exhaustion, the transmutation of ashes. Well, I'm gonna tell you later about this, because this is like the maquette of the one I showed. Well, I can tell you about it now, of the one I showed here in Kassel. There were like machines which were called mill of blood. You know, windmills are machines that use wind. Water mills water, obviously. But there are places where there is not another source of energy but labor, either from animals or humans. These are called mills of blood. They were like in a lot of places. You know, they are basically like using the donkey moving these very big stones. That is a mill of blood. But the 3 of these machines were constructed for making coins in America and Latin America when the Spanish were there. One was in Mexico, one was in Peru, and the third one in Bolivia. I was interested in the one in Bolivia because, as I told you, the mines were like very high, and it's very difficult to breathe. There are 4,000 meters, and it's a very difficult place to be. So initially they used oxen and mules to make them work, but since the conditions were really very harsh, the animals began to die and were very expensive to take to that place. So they began to use slaves and natives. So for me, it was very strong how a human body became into the face of the king in silver. So this is for this first approach, I made like a Catholic relic. The Catholic relics are made to keep the body of the saints. You know, all of them have like pieces of tissue or pieces of bones or blood. So I constructed a small reproduction of it. Instead of slaves, I decided to carve in bone horses, because horses were the animals that were brought by the Europeans to America to conquer and to use as workers, to say it in a way. Yeah, I'm gonna return to this later because it has to do with the piece I did in documenta. But this is initially what the mill of lot was, and the mill of lot in Bolivia is what it is about. This was like a joke, basically. I was thinking in economy and stock markets. At the beginning, I thought, you know, they're like algorithms and everything's controlled by this. But then I discovered something very obvious, that economy is basically hysterical and is emotional. Stock markets can change according if people is scared, if it's happy, or if it's in love, it has trust or not trust. So I decided to, when I was in New York, I remember to see like this bull in Wall Street, which is this sculpture, and the tourists touching the balls of the bull to be lucky, and to have all these rituals all around the bull, because it's fortune, because fortune changes as stock markets. So I bought a render of this, and I asked some people to tell me, like, describe me emotional objects. And I decided to make like alteration of this sculpture using all this description of emotional things. It's a joke basically, and I printed it in 3D in marble using 3D technology. This is the last of the studies of exhaustion I wanted to show you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is an emotional object, for example?
For instance, I told them, you have to describe me one object without telling me what this object is. They tell me like it was white, it was given by my mother, it gave me like some, it was, you know, like they were all these descriptions without naming the object. So it was like, for me, they were like pure descriptions. Is it more or less understandable?
How did it get to this form? Because those forms are kind of cylinder.
No. For instance, like when I was working with this designer, and sometimes the horns of the bull were like shorter. Sometimes he had 3 pinos. Sometimes he had 3 eyes. Sometimes he had no feet. So then I make combinations. Let me show you. Now you have to see like close. Here you can see like some of the horns are smaller. Some of the bulls are cows, and yeah, they were like a baby combination of these fellows. And the last studies exhaustion before coming to the documenta work, I was interested about labor and about what happens when you die and when you. I'm gonna put it another way. I was thinking, for instance, in a bureaucrat. In a bureaucrat who has worked in the same place for 20 years, when he's retired and when he dies, nobody's gonna know about him. He's gonna disappear from the memory, even of his loved ones. So I was thinking that for the most cruel thing that happened to someone is to be forgotten, and to be used by a system, then to be forgotten. So I was thinking, how can I work with these kind of things? So I was working with I was researching about printers, and I had a very small budget for doing something, and I was researching about sweat. Sweat is this metaphor of labor, but at the same time is DNA. So I decided to hack a printer to make it print with sweat. So I began to work with something which is called the Invisible Encyclopedia, collecting the sweat of people, which is at the same time DNA and images. So I told all these people, yeah, I'm gonna do a deal with you. I'm gonna give you one book with the images you want, to preserve forever, and with your DNA, but I'm gonna have to keep one because we want this to be in a collection or somewhere where your story and your label is gonna be respected. I'm gonna be there forever. So the images are blue. I don't know if you still can see it, because when you print it, it's very difficult because of the sun. It's kind of difficult to see it because when it's dried, sweat gets invisible. But since it's DNA and it's organic, you still can see it using UV light or black light. So the most of the images are like this. For instance, I did this project in Mexico, and I'm continuing doing this in Visible Encyclopedia. I have around like 30 books now, but I haven't had enough time, but I have to continue this. And I've been doing this in many countries. This was done in Cuba. In Cuba, I was interested because they can describe their life as a sequence of objects. Because as you know, what happened with the blocking in Cuba is that you have to live with the same objects for a long time. You can have like replacement for chairs or for even for glasses, for whatever. So they develop an emotional relationship with objects. I was very interested into this. So because they could transform themselves into a sequence of objects. So this guy was a makeup researcher. So he decided to print the face of all the showgirls he had makeup. Or no, sorry, they are not more. Other guy decided to print all the nails and the screws he collected through 20 years of labor, and yeah, it was more or less these kind of things they were printing. This was the last studies of exhaustion before like coming to the documenta piece. I'm gonna show you the other one later. The documenta piece was based in this idea of the mill of blood. The problem for me was how to use one of these machines that basically kill people, and represented all this history of terror, 300 years of terror. For me, was how ethically work with this. So it took me a long time because it's complicated. In the end, physically there was a reproduction of the original mill of blood, one-to-one reproduction of the original mill of blood. But the energy was very different because there were not slaves propelling the machine. And the machine had new technology. It was not that difficult to move. You could even move it with one hand. So the thing was, what should produce this new machine? So I began to work with some hackers. I'm working with them now. I can tell you later in the project we're working together. You can be like the witness of all the labor that took to make the, sorry, I'm not very articulated today. Instead producing silver coins, I began to work with these hackers creating a cryptocurrency. Now here comes the baroque part, because cryptocurrency are at the same time money for programs, at the same time are programs. So the programs we created was a program to create democracy, which is a voting system. At the beginning, we wanted to sell because in order to give value to cryptocurrency, you have to sell part of it, in an operation called ICO, initial coin offered. But it's a little bit troublesome legally. In terms of legality, it's a little bit problematic. So we decided to give it another to take another path. So this program is made to create like democracy. Let me explain you something before. I come from Latin America, and in Latin America it's supposed to be democratic countries. That it's supposed to we elect our presidents and ministers and whatever. But in the end, the most of the elections are hacked, and doesn't happen in a good way. So the problem is that all the systems are tricked, and the people who's in power usually can manipulate elections. This happens in Brazil, this happens in Mexico, this happens in Argentina, but basically it happens in Mexico a lot. So I was interested in this technology, which is called blockchain. To make long story short, blockchain is a system. Normal technology needs, or like Google or Facebook needs a server And for instance, Google has your information, but you don't have the information of Google of the other users. That's a problem. The blockchain technology, in this technology, nobody has your information. Everybody has the information of everybody, but everything is encrypted. And it's encrypted in real time, and it's happening in real time. There's not a head. So for me, this is very interesting because all the things in blockchain are like registered, are transparent, and has a lot of characteristics that helps democracy. So these guys created a system for create democratic elections in a country. In the end, after 1 year, we're about to introduce it to the Mexican government as a proposal to a new election system. So basically, the idea was to make the mill of blood, create another kind of currency, and still thinking how to develop part of the idea was to create like a budget to create new projects. But it's a little bit complex to explain now, since I'm not the most articulated now. And yeah, that's basically the work I've been doing that I wanted to show you, and I want to thank Leo for inviting me here. If you have any questions, sorry for the not articulated talk, but yeah.
Wow, really intense work. A lot of information. Any questions?
Thanks. So, how do you see your position? You told about the visits of the prison, and I got interested when you said one of the prisoners asked you to traffic something for him. What makes did you traffic in the end to get the so how do you see yourself in this position? Are you still an artist who is trafficking, who becomes you're doing something illegal for him? But do you see yourself as a Robin Hood or as a criminal, or just is it a part of your work as an artist?
Neither. The thing is that there's a thing in prison because you know they are full of prisoners and people who has robbed, raped, and a lot of things, killed. But the thing is there's like a contradiction because there's a system, an honor system, meaning that if I do the things I was supposed to do, you're gonna do it. The thing is that part of the project was to say that my time was equally to the time of them. So the proposal was that I gave them basically a body without soul and without brain. They could do whatever they want me to. They can do whatever they want me to do. If they want me to hit my face with the wall, I will do it. The thing is that the end was like a trustworthy system, an honor system. So it's amoral in terms that legality doesn't matter, because I have to do what they ask me to do because I'm not me anymore. It's their time. So in order to make like this magic happen, because magic happens if there's like honor in both sides. If you know, also it happened this because when the most of the project was done like in the underground, because at the beginning I was invited as an artist, then after when years passed by I was nothing. I was like some guy who was doing stuff inside the prison. And the most of the agreements I did with the prisoners were like you know, nobody can speak about it. You know, so it was like an honor system. So it was part of the deal. In a way I was a mercenary, but no, because I have to keep the honor of the deal. So in this system, this morality or legality is not important.
So, and then I come to the second part of my question. Is this do you see the same, is this the same constellation with the hackers you're working with?
The thing is that I with all the people I work, I try to establish collaboration. So this took me a lot of time. And it's not the most of my works are not only mine, are like make with people. With them, with the hackers, we began like a friendship relationship, and then it evolved. They sell like it because they did this the cryptocurrency for free. They usually ask for like 20,000 for creating this, and they did it for free. They even pay their travels to here, and they continue working to this, and they've been like doing this for free. So this is more or less like I don't know. I try to look for complicity when working with people to make things work in a community. In this sense, in an autonomous community, we're like working together. So in the end, it's like because I'm continue working with them. Now we're finishing the cryptocurrency for like making it work in the government. And now we are working with bots, and they're like, it's like an agreement system. It's like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's in a way based in what I learned in the prison, which is an honor system. If you do the things you were supposed to do, I have to do, and it's like I don't know if it's friendship, but it's community basically.
So actually, if I can sum it up, you're always working with people who are on the outside of a community, or at society, like people in the prison, hackers who are mostly portrayed by the society of people who try to break down the given or change the given.
Again, this idea of legality is very different from Europe to Mexico to Latin America, because legality is not the same as justice, and it's not the same as honor. So, for instance, prisoners have been pictured of these people who are like there are a lot of caricature of prisoners, such like these very rude guys and this. But this was what I found surprising, is that I found the same amount of good people inside the prison that in the outside. The same happens with these hackers, because at the same time they're like entrepreneurs. They work with they have a very good project now with a feminist collective for making the rape denounces based on blockchain in India. They work at the same time with bank whistleblowers. It's like, I think that the problem is that this kind of people is pictured in black and white terms, which doesn't happen. I don't know honestly why in the end I like to work with this kind of people, but for me it's just the same. It's not like a very big difference. Maybe it's because it's the people I get along with.
Maybe they have a interesting story to tell that is not allowed to be told.
And I don't know, because I think that there's a problem. We artists are sometimes very cocky, because we think that we are the ones who talk for the people, who give them like the spot, but that's not true. For instance, the hackers are. This guy is basically a genius. It's like this for me. For me, it's more like to belong to a community, to get along with people, and because I have problems with this idea of the artist as a hero who's like giving voice to the voiceless. The prisoners doesn't need an artist. They didn't care if I was an artist. They wanted me because I was doing deals with time. Miners were like, took me like 2 months to get one of these spits. I'm much more interested in to create this relationship, because sometimes what you show in an art space is the corpse of art. Art happens for me when you are doing it, and then in the art places there's like another layer that you have to work with the language of this place, like which is galleries, museums, and fairs, which is different. For me, the most interesting part of it is in there. So it's a very difficult question to ask to answer, because there's not an answer, and also the points of view from here to Latin America is basically different. Basically, I work in Latin America and in the South, because these hackers are the South, they're Spanish. So, yeah.
Any more questions?
when I saw your piece of the documenta, I couldn't really manage to understand what is this object and what does it mean. Did you think about some other ways of presentation, or how to make this object an object of use, or how to make the people sweat when they see this or practice this art?
Yeah, it was different because the labor was interested was not a physical labor but a conceptual labor, in terms that documenta was like a frame to give legitimacy to this currency. Because if it hadn't been in documenta, the government wouldn't be interested into work with this currency. So in the end, it was a different system for creating value.
Yeah.
You know, in the colonial times, it was created through basically like sweat.
Yeah.
I was not interested in sweat anymore. So yeah, maybe there was a problem with the explaining of this, but I think I did my best. You know, like it's maybe part
So
of.
you actually were not interested in the recipients, but in the art market
No,
itself?
no,
No, that's completely
not in the
cool.
art market. But I think that maybe it was a part of the. I don't know if it was. I don't know. Part of the people who was explaining the piece or whatever. I don't know if it was part of the curatorial part, but I'm not very sure about that. I'm not very good in this part of things. For me, it was very interesting to create a different meal of lot in terms of a legitimacy system for this currency for creating democracy. Because otherwise, if it hadn't been done into documenting through this very big machine, if I tried to offer this to trying to create democracy to a government, they had told me, good for you, and that's all.
And how is this object then viewed in, for example, hacker circles? Or is it circulating somewhere else than in artistic or governmental
You know,
circles?
I'm trying. The problem is that the piece is very difficult to install.
Yes.
It was like,
Maybe not the object, but your idea of currency and democracy.
the idea is that we're like working. So I'm kind of based in Switzerland because these hackers are based in Switzerland. They try to use this democratic system for Catalonia, for the, you know what's happening in Spain.
Yeah.
You can see the news. You can see this guy because this system was could be used for this, and this guy had to go to Switzerland because of this. But we prove the point that it can be used in a voting system. So the idea is to continue working to this, like using the currency, basically. But we're still working on this. So after tomorrow, I have to return to Switzerland to continue working on this, basically.
Okay. But some hackers references? Is it like, how do the hacker friends speak about this project?
For for them it's like it's an exchange.
Okay, cool.
Because if I make this, if I can put this into the government, the technology is like proven to be good.
Okay.
So they can make derivates of these products like commercial products. So it's like a win-win negotiation. So we're offering this to the government for free. That's part of the thing. So yeah.
Could you tell, is your machine a metaphorical way of producing the currency, or does it actually produce?
It actually produced currency. You know, the thing is that it produced a metallic currency that nobody could obtain. And the metallic currency went to these plastic tubes and activated the machines that mined the digital currency. But the coins, let me show it to you. We didn't have too many coins. We only had 30,000. So we could only open the machine for 3 hours or 3 times per week, more or less.
3 times a week for 5 hours.
Yeah, because we didn't have enough coins. Only 30,000. This is a coin. It produced the well people, including him, who put this white coin into these rolls. Then when the people was doing this, the coin went through the rolls and created this currency and went through these computers and create the digital counterpart. So it really was. The thing is that we're like still thinking into sell this cryptocurrency, because when you create a cryptocurrency, you do a process which is called ICO, initial coin offered. What happens here is that you sell 1% of the coins to investors. So the add-on I wanted to give is like to give the real one, which is an art piece from Documenta, plus the digital counterpart. So you gather an amount of money, and this amount of money I wanted is designed to belong to nobody. So together with people who was included in the project, including one people from Documenta, we were supposed to decide. But legally it's a little bit complicated because the United States government forbids the eco sellings. So it has to be like done like in a very careful way. Also, I was worried like not to use Documenta appear to be taking money from Documenta. So we decided to stop it, and then like continue working to the software and trying to offering to the government to make it work. It doesn't matter if we create the eco, but I'm still thinking to creating the eco into giving one piece from Documenta, as well as giving what's the name of this, the program itself. Once we prove it, to make it that it's working in a government, is working into something. So yeah, basically last time these hackers created one cryptocurrency, it gathered 500 bitcoins, which is 5 million euros in the last cycle they created. So the idea was created like to create a, let's say, a budget for projects that was decided by a committee and blah 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 blah. But I'm still like, we're trying to deal with this, so we decided to go for the legal part, like not trying to avoid problems. First to offer to a government to make it work there for free, then decide if it's gonna be sold or not. But the idea of creating this was to create like this budget. Because I was dealing with the thing that everything like which is created in Documenta becomes into a souvenir and has a value, because you was creating Documenta. Documenta legitimizes this, and is the most important art event in the world. So I was dealing how to try not to exotize this. That's why all the coins were taken into underground metallic box. That's why I decided that nobody but some of the staff of Documenta should have the coins, and it's sealed. So I'm still like thinking if we are gonna do the ICO or no. So that's why I wanted to wait a little bit to make it everything legal and clear and transparent.
Sorry for asking again. So you collected the coins in the box underneath the construction.
Yes.
And was there then an interface which translated the coins into the cryptocurrency?
Yes.
And that's at a totally other spot. So this was on the server space beneath our computers.
The computers were like on the top.
On the top.
Yeah, it was very difficult. Yeah.
It was a small box like this size. So
it was very because each time a cryptocurrency was created, there was like a QR code. You had a link to Telegram, and each time a coin was created, you had like a notification in the phone. Yeah, it was a pain in the. I hated it honestly, but yeah, the thing is that all the coins are stored, and yeah, they are real. So the thing was like if I do the ICO to sell one piece of Documenta and the digital counterpart, but at the same time the money belongs to nobody. The thing is, since it's based in blockchain, nobody. The only way to have access to the money is there are 9 keys. If the 9 keys are activated at the same time, you can get the money. Otherwise, it's impossible to have it. So the thing was to give 1 key to each one of the people who has participated. But since I haven't done the ICO, I haven't done the thing, because the idea, the very romantic idea, was to pay the symposium itself using the money coming from it. So I'm still like trying to decide if we can solve the legal parts of it, to do it. Yeah, that's why I also came here, because I was in Switzerland and Leo told me to come. And yeah, I'm finishing this basically. Any other question?
So what's up next?
First, I want to finish the. I have to finish this month because I'm leaving on the 15th of August, and now I continue working with the hackers. After the next project is called the Cachas. The Cachas was like the first multicultural group that existed in Latin America. They were thieves. Let's say pirate miners. Let me explain you how this works. First, the name Cachas came from the onomatopoeia catch, that for Aymaras is the sound of the chisel against the rock, like catch, catch, catch. And the Cachas were these thieves from the mines in Cerro Rico in Potosí. And they were like basically pirate miners. These miners mined the mines while the other miners were resting, meaning weekends and holidays, because the church forbidden the legal miners to work in these days, because you have to adore Jesus Christ and whatever. So these miners get into this ideological loophole and mine the mines. And it was very interesting because it was the first multicultural group in Latin America. There were like even Dutch, Spanish, native Bolivian, Aymaras, Quechuas, slaves. And the thing that was very interesting, these guys created their own social class, because the New Spain system was based in caste. So, but these guys created a new one that didn't belong to anything. So I was searching for a parallel, and for me the perfect ones were the hackers, because again they are multicultural. They're like Swedish, they are like a Peruvian, there's like a Spanish. And they're like these guys who work into these loopholes because they create money from nothing. They can hack, they can create bots for governments. They have like companies, cryptocurrency companies. They are like consultants. They work with activists, but it's like they have a theory which is called the mine. So the idea is to say that internet behaves like a mine and has the same rules. You have to be careful. You cannot overexploit it. It can fall down. Yes, there's a lot of things, but it behaves the same as a mine. So for me, it was perfect. So this project is about, I'm working with them as I used to work with people, which is long-term relationships and partnership relationships. So the approach was with creating the currency. Now we are working with bots. The ones that are, the ones that were used by Trump in Cambridge Analytica and all these kind of things, and yeah, let's see what happens there, because all the projects we develop are like made by consensus. They do it for fun, and I also do them for fun. So the first project we're trying to do, they have now like 20,000 fake accounts. So I created a project. It was a video, a very simple video, where in this video a beatboxer, the ones who beatbox, was reproducing the code of one of the bots that was used by Trump into the elections. It's like singing and this is supposed that we're going to distribute this video using these accounts and using these bots as the governments spread fake news and spread this kind of thing. So this is like the first sketch we're trying to do, and let's see how it ends.
So is it like you moved away from object and sculpting physically? Are you now like a digital sculptor?
Sorry.
So your main topic, so maybe shifted away from physical object, right, to like imminent system related problems, or make systems work more than translate system to object? Nobody get it? What I want to ask?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't get it, sorry.
You say I'm an artist. I'm interested in material, in object, and sculpture. Do you see this coding and digital part of the system as sculpture also, or is like sculpture like now it's like two different things, or is there digital coding? Do you see sculpture in coding also?
Well, it's different because I always have had this question: is how these have value? It has to do also with the mill of blood. Some people say, yeah, because there's like representation of the gold a nation has in whatever, but that doesn't happen that doesn't happen anymore since the 70s. So this has value because it's an agreement. We all agree that this has value. Bitcoin does the same. Bitcoin creates a digital agreement that something has value. Indigenous agreement. So for me, the question about economy is how this agreement is created. And believe it or not, it has to do with magic. Let me explain you why. There's like this study of Levi Strauss about the shamans. How a shaman becomes some, like this magical entity. A shaman has to perform a miracle, let's say a miracle in front of the community. It's like a performatic thing. Once the community has agreed that this guy is magical, it's magical at the end. The same happens with this. There's like a performative system that makes us believe that this has value, and he has the same codes as magic. Magic is a system where the symbolic merges with the material, and one affects the other. The problem with magic is that we have exotized the magic. We think that magic happens in very specific contexts, such as voodoo, but no. This idea of magic where physical merges with symbolical happens in economy as well, and it affects our life. Phantoms, zombies, all these kind of things exist. So concerning to code, I was thinking at the same time in poetry, because poetry is language affecting reality, and in a way spellcasting, believe it or not. Poetry is like how languages, well, we think in language and in images. A poetry expands language and gives another sense to words. And this expands languages, expands the mind and expands the reality. And code is a writing system such as poetry that affects reality. Code is a system that creates the likes on Facebook, and you can be heartbroken by a like. Is a system that creates governments. What happens with Trump and what happens with Latin American governments and with African governments happens. The fortune tellers, the economies sell futures. Things still exist. So in this sense, it's more than a sculpture. I would say that since also art deals with this symbolic realm merging with reality, I would say that is magic in this sense. But magic thought at this merging of these worlds that happens. So again, the problem for me is that we have exotized the world, but it happens. You can see it there. This has no value, but we have agreed that this happens, and this has an emotional value for everybody of us. That's the answer.
Are there any more questions?
It was one
more question for me.
Yeah, to say for the mill of blood, the last thing also this idea of value, how value is created. I have the theory that value comes from sacrifice. In Spanish, sacrifice is sacrificio, and it's related to sangre, which is blood. And it's related with sagrado, which is sacred. So in the end, to create value is to make things sacred. So it's a sacrifice system. So the idea of how to create systems that are not based in sacrifice and other things. So was basically this idea. Yeah, that was all. Sorry.
Oh, that was a very nice ending, I guess. Thank you, Antonio, for your contribution. And herewith we end the symposium on autonomy at the art school. Thank you for coming, all of you, and have a nice last Rundgang evening, and see you next time. Thanks.
Believe in magic.